Final Fight is an arcade game that was released by Capcom in 1989. It became an instant classic and a prime example of the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre. It also became the source of a controversial debate that has been going on for 22 years now. What's all the fuss about? Well, it's a long story, one that's been botched with each retelling, but I've got the facts that will set this tale straight once and for all. Hopefully. So, get ready for a comprehensive analysis of the epicenter of this epic altercation, the character whose mysterious charms are as infectious as their namesake, Poison. First things first, let's get familiar with how the whole thing got started. Or rather, how everyone thinks it got started. When Final Fight was being localized for its US release on the Super Nintendo, concerns were expressed regarding the game containing violence towards females. The females in question were Poison, along with her palette swap Roxy, both of whom were enemies that the player would face throughout the game. In order to solve this issue and avoid any further upset, Capcom's own Akira Yasuda changed Poison and Roxy into transvestites. Thank goodness that got sorted out. After all, hitting a woman is insensitive and inappropriate, but hitting a tranny? That's totally okay. KO! Seems believable, right? Wrong. And here's why. Inside the manuals packaged within Japanese copies of Final Fight on the Super Nintendo, Poison is described as a new half. Final Fight came out in Japan nearly 2 years before it did in America. Which begs the question, why did the Japanese version refer to Poison as a new half when her gender was changed specifically for the American release? That's because Poison wasn't changed for the American release. In fact, she's been transgender since the very beginning. But don't take my word for it, take Capcom's. This is the original concept art for Poison, and it predates Final Fight's original arcade release. More important than the drawing, however, is the writing underneath it. Poison was labeled as a new half from the start. But we wouldn't have known any of this. Both Poison and Roxy were completely removed from the game for its North American release. In their stead were two rather frail-looking thugs named Sid and Billy. However, in 1993, Poison and Roxy finally made their debut in the West on the Sega CD version of Final Fight, and the only change they received was a change of clothes. All the while, Capcom had once again made Poison's gender abundantly clear within the manuals for Final Fight on the Sharp X68000. Unfortunately, the truth of Poison's origin remained locked away in Japan, leaving rumor and speculation to fester as the years went by, and it was only a matter of time before the rumors were brought to the surface again. By the late 90s, the Final Fight series had faded into obscurity. But that didn't stop Poison from making cameos in other Capcom titles in the meantime. She made a brief cameo in Street Fighter Alpha 2 and appeared as a non-playable character in Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. Poison even debuted as a playable character in Final Fight Revenge for the Sega Saturn. Her most recent appearance was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, in which she appeared in the background of Hagar's stage. But by far, Poison's most important appearance was in Capcom Classics Collection for the PS2. As the name implies, it's a collection of famous arcade titles, and naturally, Final Fight is included. Within the special features for Final Fight, you can find character descriptions for both Poison and Roxy, both of which directly refer to Poison as transgender. In spite of having given Poison several appearances within the Street Fighter franchise, Capcom remained silent on her unique past. That is, until Yoshinori Ono came along. Yoshinori Ono is a producer who has been working with Capcom for the past decade and has been involved with several of their franchises throughout his career. In recent years, Ono has been producing the immensely popular Street Fighter IV titles. The booming success of the games prompted Ono to create a Twitter account devoted to receiving feedback and sharing news with fans. Eventually, Ono was questioned about Poison. This led to one of his more memorable statements, one that is quoted quite often in the never-ending argument over Poison's gender. Let's set the record straight. In North America, Poison is officially a post-op transsexual, but in Japan, she simply tucks her business away to look female. Wow, how does that work?
We are now entering United States airspace.
And that wasn't some off-the-cuff explanation either. He referred back to this when questioned on possible characters for future Street Fighter titles, saying that Poison's region-specific gender would be too confusing for her to be included. Which is ironic, considering it was Ono himself who caused the most confusion. After Ono's bewildering words, the amount of interest in Poison only increased, so much so that his Twitter page would be bombarded with questions and comments regarding her for months on end. But Ono hasn't been the only member of Capcom's team to bring attention to Poison. One of Final Fight's original developers, Akira Nishitani, has stated in the past that Poison could be either male or female, and more recently during Comic-Con 2011, Capcom Senior Vice President Christian Svensson stated that Poison's gender is intended to be ambiguous. Going a little off topic here, but has anyone else noticed how Roxy has completely dropped off the face of the earth? Her case is just as curious as Poison's, and yet she never appeared outside of Final Fight. I guess palette swaps just aren't cut out for fame. In any case, now that I've exhausted my slew of statements from Capcom's colorful bunch of employees, let's take a look at some of the more recent developments in this debacle. As previously mentioned, Christian Svensson brought Poison to the public eye once again during Comic-Con 2011. But why?
When the sun goes down, the stars come out like the ghost of yesterday. So dream come down, 'cause some things never change. Baby, sing it loud. We ain't gonna fuck around. When the sun goes down.
Because she's going to be a playable character in the upcoming title Street Fighter X Tekken. That's why. And who better to reveal the news than Yoshinori Ono himself? As if that wasn't enough, Ono announced this news alongside several cosplayers dressed as Poison, half of which were men, and one of which was Ono himself. I'm sorry you had to see that. Needless to say, this was pretty big news to the fighting game community, and gamers in general. So naturally, with the return of Final Fight's infamous pink-haired vixen headlining most major gaming websites, it wasn't long before the heated debate over Poison's gender was lit aflame once again. But for all the people talking about Poison, there seems to be staggering amounts that haven't seen all the new information regarding her. So let's take a look at the details of Poison's latest appearance, shall we? First off, let's check out Capcom's official website for Street Fighter X Tekken. Here we see Poison's character profile. A former member of the Mad Gear crime syndicate, she is constantly at odds with her partner Hugo, although the two seem to get along just fine regardless. She may look like a finely curved woman, but looks can be deceiving. Wow. No pun intended, that's a pretty ballsy description for such a controversial character. A line like that is practically confirmation that Poison's packing a little something extra downstairs. However, if you go to the website today, you'll see that the text has been changed to something not quite as blunt, but it is still questionable. Let's look at some gameplay footage next. Sadly, Poison has lost this match, but it does allow for some interesting dialogue from the victors. Ryu says, "Your looks can really be deceiving. I should be careful not to fall into your trap." Admiral Akbar has trained you well, Ryu. Chun-Li says, "You're not very ladylike at all. I felt like I was fighting against a guy." Oh, Capcom. You witty devils, you. Last but not least, let's address a rumor that's been popping up ever since Poison's reveal at Comic-Con. I've heard a few people claiming that Capcom announced Poison as 100% female at some point during Comic-Con 2011. Every time that I heard someone say this, I'd ask if they could state their sources, and every time, they couldn't do it. But just to be sure, I found whatever I could from Capcom's events at this year's Comic-Con, just in case I missed something. And after looking through live streams, press conferences, panels, and interviews, I just can't find anything. Well, there you have it. That's everything I've been able to dig up on Poison's history. I know it's a lot of information to absorb, especially at the pace we've been going. So let's compile all the information we've gathered into one convenient chart. The evidence that supports Poison being transgender stacks up like this. Original concept art for Final Fight. Akira Yasuda's original statement on Final Fight. Akira Nishitani's comment on Poison. Japanese instruction manual for Final Fight on the Super Nintendo. Japanese instruction manual for Final Fight on the X68000. Character profiles in Capcom Classics collection for the PlayStation 2. Yoshinori Ono's original statement. Yoshinori Ono's follow-up statements. Christian Svensson's statement on Poison. Official Street Fighter Cross Tekken websites. And various dialogue within Street Fighter Cross Tekken itself. On the other hand, the evidence supporting Poison being 100% female looks like this. Actually, I haven't been able to find any solid evidence that specifically refers to Poison as 100% female. And I'm not omitting information to try and convince you here. I really can't find anything. I guess I could count what Christian Svensson and Akira Nishitani said towards this side, but neither of their statements actually confirm anything. The only reason I even counted their word towards the transgender side is because they supported the possibility simply by having acknowledged it. Even if I were to remove these from the list, there would still be 9 valid points left on the transgender side, as opposed to 0 on the 100% female side. The consistent supply of information from Capcom over the years is more than enough to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that Poison's transgender status is, and has always been, official. Of course, no matter how much proof you shove in people's faces, someone's always going to protest. So let's try to minimize that by addressing a few of the common arguments brought up whenever the subject of Poison is on the table. Poison's gender is completely irrelevant, and nobody should care because it adds nothing to the gameplay. Well, all I can say to that one is, good point. You're right, the gameplay is completely unaffected by the contents of Poison's shorts. But I do think it's relevant in a different way. For a lot of people, half the fun of Street Fighter, or any fighting game for that matter, is its cast of characters. A series with so many characters should take care to differentiate said characters, and make them all appealing in their diversity. And I think Street Fighter does a fair job of that. Things like this are especially important to people like me, who are terrible at the games themselves. If there weren't any interesting characters, we would have little reason to play the games. The only reason Capcom made Poison a man was because of stupid American censors. Change her back. As I mentioned earlier, the Japanese copies of Final Fight classified Poison as a new half, meaning her gender was not determined solely by American markets. More importantly, the official concept art for Poison specifically refers to her being transgender. And even if it was the result of censorship, Capcom probably wouldn't care. And why should they? Poison's history was so interesting to people that she's now an extremely memorable character that's given Capcom nothing but publicity. Poison being transgender is pointless. It makes no sense. Really, I think it makes a lot of sense. Let's think about what Street Fighter is all about. The entire series revolves around skilled fighters from across the world meeting in battle, and Capcom has included characters from all different countries and all different walks of life. Of course, there have been those few characters whose cultural representation has been laughable, but overall, Capcom has made their characters fair and fun. So doesn't it seem fair that out of all the ladies of Street Fighter, one of them is transgender? Poison fits in perfectly with that central theme of representing the unique people from the world over. Poison's gender should remain ambiguous. That way she can be anything to anyone. Not only is this one of the more reasonable viewpoints I've heard on the topic, but it's also the same stance Capcom seems to take when asked for an official statement on Poison. It's understandable that they would take a neutral stance when asked about something so taboo, but one glance at their track record and it's easy to see their true intentions for Poison. In the interest of time, I'll leave the opinions at that. After all, that's what the comments section is for. Besides, I have one last item to address before this is over. During Capcom's Street Fighter X Tekken panel at EVO 2011, both Yoshinori Ono and fellow Capcom employee Seth Killian entertained the idea of holding a poll to decide Poison's gender. Now, it's pretty obvious that Ono said this jokingly, but let's assume he was being serious and used this as an opportunity to gather some final thoughts on the subject of Poison. What could Capcom possibly gain from changing Poison now? They would be throwing away her history after all these years of consistently providing their own canon. And consider the fact that Poison's gender controversy is largely the reason why she became so popular in the first place. If Capcom changed Poison after having finally given her a chance to shine, it'd be a major disappointment to a lot of fans. At the moment, Capcom seems content to let the fans speculate upon the matter freely. Maybe this video has given you some insight as to how Poison came to be the iconic enigma she is today, and maybe you got a few laughs out of it too. But one thing is for certain, Poison will be in the limelight alongside the rest of the World Warriors for Street Fighter's 25th anniversary, and that's pretty awesome. Well, that about wraps things up. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this in-depth look at Poison's past and present. As for her future, ultimately that's up to Capcom. So Capcom, if you ever find yourselves wondering what to do with Poison, remember, Poison's not broke, so don't fix her.